Hey everyone, and welcome to episode number 2 of the MetaManiacs show. I'm your host, Dan Green, and today I'm joined by Mike Piper.
Hey everyone.
Dylan Straube.
What's up?
And, for the first time, Jordan Syverson was able to make it.
Hey everyone, how's it going?
Today's episode, we are talking about Tcg Turn-Offs. So this is kind of... This is an interesting conversation because we've all had experience looking at different card games. I'm sure you guys have as well, where you were interested in playing, you got friends who want to play it, you had a community building in your store, but there was some element of it that just didn't quite jive with you, something you learned about playing, or maybe you were playing a game for a long time and eventually you were like, I'm just not having fun. You maybe thought back and tried to figure out why that was. Today we're just going to talk about that. Not every card game is perfect, is the truth of things. And there's a wide variety of reasons why someone just may lose interest as their personal opinion changes on a game. So without any further ado, I'm going to have Mike kick this one off. Mike, why don't you tell us about the TCG Turn-Offs you want to talk about today?
The big turn-off that I have with TCG, some TCG games, is rotation. And I know this is a real controversial one. You got a lot of people that are fans of rotation, and then you have a lot of people that are not fans of rotation. And it's one of the reasons why when I played the Pokemon and even the Magic, the Gathering TCG game, I was, hey, I purchased all these cards and I got this deck and it's looking all good. And then all of a sudden they do rotation and now my deck ain't legal. And then I got to turn around and buy more stuff. And then I got a bunch of older stuff that I really can't do anything with. They're just sitting in a binder. And yeah, they have collector's value, but most people in the competitive environment are staying with the most competitive, the current rotation type deck. So it's one of the things that really turned me off from a TCG is when I see the rotation. I would rather band an errata list than an actual rotation.
Yeah, and you know, that's a complicated subject because especially when a game gets really, really big and long-lasting for a long time, it can be difficult to keep... the reason they do rotation is it can be difficult to keep cards available to everybody to use, especially older ones. It also can push a more interesting format, and most importantly, it can make it... I think we're going to talk a little bit about this with one of the other co-hosts here, but it can make it easier to jump into a game if the available card pool is smaller, right? And so they often push rotation to do that to help people get into the game. But the key is when you put a game with rotation, you also have to push older formats where those cards are still legal equally well, and that can be troublesome because then you're splitting your formats, and like maybe you have a Friday Night Magic, you got 6 people who want to play Standard, and you got 6 people who want to play Modern. You can you can launch 2 like smaller tournaments, but it'd be nicer if they all just wanted to play the same tournament, and then you had 12 people playing the same thing. So definitely is a lot of give or take there, but totally an understandable thing for some people. They see rotation, they just want to get out of there.
Yeah, I wish they would. Some of these card games that do have, rotation, or even the ones like I understand they want, to have, like, I think Yu-Gi-Oh doesn't have rotation. What I would really like to see is like new sets come out that actually reprint older cards. So
Sure.
Like really older, yeah, absolutely, yeah, older cards.
And Magic does that a lot too, for what it's worth. They do a pretty good job of reprinting a lot of things in their like Masters sets and various like dual deck products and stuff. But there's just so many cards, so it's an understandable turnoff. Dylan, how about you? What do you got for us today?
I echo what Mike said. I feel similarly about rotation a lot of the time. I feel like not sometimes, like, people fall on either side of the coin where they're like, well, if you have smaller available sets, people can jump in and feel better about getting into the competitive scene. But then you have people like yourself or ourselves really that like end up playing a game for the entire longevity of it, and it's like, well, I want to play my cards from the first set, that feel really upset when they go through and they foil out their entire deck and then something gets tossed out because you're like, oh well, now 47 out of the 50 cards in my deck are foil because 3 have to be new cards and I haven't traded for, what I mean, stuff like that. So like, but on the other hand, I know you guys have a lot more experience with Magic than I do, but my Magic experience is very small, and one of those major reasons is because it's got 30 years of backlog. Um, and like I'm a huge Spider-Man fan, right? I want to read all the Spider-Man comics. I want to watch all the movies, consume everything I can. I've read like maybe 5 because I know that there's 40, 50 years of Spider-Man. Don't at me if I measured the wrong years of Spider-Man, but I know Magic is like 30, right? And I'm already super invested in this character that I love, and I love all the stories and reading what people think and like people explaining the big arcs and stuff. But there's just so much to it that even with something that I'm super invested in, I haven't taken the time to pick up. Whereas with Magic, like I'm not invested in it, but it's a little daunting to look at that and be like, oh man, like people are talking about, they talk about planeswalkers and they say all these buzzwords, and I'm like, oh man, I've heard of those, but I think the backlog is just too much for me to really want to get hard into. And then I've heard that Magic is also a pretty a chasey game where like some sets just the value isn't there, and some sets the value is if you buy like 6 or 7 or 8 boxes and you strike gold. But I mean, I wouldn't know. I would know there's a couple smaller TCGs that I've played that have been similar to that, and that I was like, oh, I bought a box, and thank God I have extra firewood, but sometimes you strike gold and you're like, oh, sweet, I got that. But, especially when you're opening it all like day one of a set, like Dan, you, myself, Mike, and Jordan sit down and we're cracking packs, and Jordan opens up 2 good boxes, and then everybody else at the table is like, awesome, Jordan, I'm super happy for you. I wish I could, like, do you have like a rickety stool and like a strong piece of rope for me? Because like I can't find any cards that I want. But yeah, generally it's not that bad, and I tend to gravitate towards games that have a better distribution in general.
Yeah, I can definitely understand that. And I remember specifically that you had mentioned when we were playing Metacross locally that you were having trouble with some of the rarity schemes in that, and you preferred the system in Final Fantasy where you got X number of legendaries out of a larger pool rather than just one every other box you get an ultra rare, and one per box you get a cross rare out of a small pool. Those types of schemes can feel a lot better opening boxes for, and just like the feel and just like trying to be able to ensure that you can buy one box and get value out of it can help someone lock into a game a lot more than other systems can. So that's definitely understandable. And I think we'll talk more in the expanded episode about everyone's Magic experience, because it's interesting here that I'm the only one with like significant experience playing Magic the Gathering, I think. Oh, Jordan, okay, all right. Maybe
I
this
started
is the right segue.
back in Odyssey, and then I played up until like Mirrodin block, and then I stopped for a bit, and then I got back in when new Mirrodin came out and played until I moved to Fargo.
Okay, fair enough. I
probably not as much
as
you,
but
experience.
It isn't quite as much as me, but still, I will say that's significant. So why don't we just use that as a segue here, Jordan? And why don't you go ahead and give us your TCG turn-offs?
All right. So, well, for me, it's going to sound kind of superficial, but the number one for me is most likely theme of whatever the material is. First and foremost, theme, like, that's the thing that when I was thinking about this question, is like, what would I see if I just saw something on the shelf that would make me be like, I want to try and see what that game is, and is the theme. Because, for example, I'm big into UFS now, and literally the only thing that hooked me to even put it on my radar, I knew it was a game, but it was one of the few card games I hadn't really played. But the thing that literally like slammed it right in front of my face, and I was like, I have to try this game literally right this second. We were on Gen Con last year, and there's a big banner that was like, Yu Yu Hakusho, new set for UFS, and I was like, I don't care what that is, I need to be a part of that right now. So I went and sat down, and then they talked about, the My Hero stuff, and then everything else that went along with it. And same with the Dragon Ball Z card game. When Score was out, I was too young, didn't have any expandable income to buy it. So I didn't get into that. But the theme alone, as a kid, I was like, if I had money, I'd buy that game. And then when I got older, Dan introduced me like at our local store. This is actually how I met Dan, is he was doing a demo for it, and I was like, isn't this game like dead and old? And he's like, it's coming back. And I immediately like demoed with him, and I was like, how do I pre-order like a bunch of stuff like right this second? I'm ready to hop in. But because I feel like, yeah, that hooks you in, and then the mechanics is what kind of keeps you there. And then other details that kind of bother me is, in the negative light, is like distribution of cards. One thing I'm going to pick on Magic here because it's one of the reasons I kind of fell out of Magic when I started getting into some other more stable card games, is the distribution of cards, not necessarily rarities, but just what they print specifically. There's a lot of cards and a lot of sets for Magic that when you look at the cards, you're like, why did they print this? Because they're cards that are just like inferior versions of other cards that are in the same set that have like same costs. You'll have like, you know, a 2/3 creature with no effect, and then you'll have a 2/3 creature in the same color with the same cost that has like, you know, like first strike, and you're like, why would I ever run this card in any deck ever when this one's just empirically better in every way? And like, I don't like cards that do that because it just feels like they're shoving more fluff in, so you are less likely to pull the cards you're looking for when you buy product. And since I was kind of poor growing up, like if I was going to buy anything, I wanted to make sure I was getting something good for it. And even though I did get into Magic when I was quite young, it still felt, it was like a feels bad moment when I had, you know, my month's allowance and I went to buy like 5 booster packs, and all of them just had like a bunch of crappy cards, and then all of them had the Garbo rare that I was like, cool, another, you know, trained org. This is a cool pack. I'm glad I spent my week's allowance on this.
So classic. One of the classic like bad rares that you got, him and Vizardrix from the starter sets. So I want to make I guess just a sort of a point of contention on what you're saying there. And I completely agree and understand with that. And I think it comes down to, there's some different schools of thought about how to do that. How to specifically fill your set with what kind of cards you're going to fill it with. And Wizards has, I think in one of Mark Rosewater's just enormous backlog of interesting kind of insights into the design of Magic, he goes into one of the aspects to putting all those like kind of chaff cards into the set is that, well, okay, I'm going to give 2 aspects. One is that they are trying to make limited format have a particular feel to it. And the reason they do that kind of stuff in part is because when they can pack the set in with a variety of different creatures, you know, your creature example, it's actually, I think, pretty uncommon for those to have the exact same cost. The one with first strike might have had an additional color in it. The creature type might be different. Even if they have the same like converted mana cost, you know, they might be different in certain aspects. And it can be a way to enable certain decks at lower rarities to be able to exist, to be able to do the things they need to do, and to ensure that not everyone's deck is stacked full of just like the most powerful cards, and that everyone has to play a deck that has more of a variance of power level, which I think is something that people look for when they're playing certain limited formats. It's part of the experience. And that's not the people who are doing like full power cube draft, because those are like designing sets like what Jordan wants to play, where every single card is literally the best card ever printed in Magic. And so you make your first pick out of 15 cards. It's like, which of the 15 of the best cards ever do I want to take? That's fun in its own right. The other reason, though, is I think actually a little more nuanced and interesting. But what they want to do is develop a way for players to sort of level up as they play in a completely visceral way, in that you start off building your deck and you're like, I'm going to put this 2/3 guy in, and then you later open up a pack and you're like, wow, I got a 2/3 guy with first strike. I'm going to take out this 2/3 guy and put in this 2/3 guy with first strike. And it helps you sort of see how creatures can power up and start to learn the value of different abilities and different things on cards. The problem with that is that that's not usually how people get into, it's not often how people get into the game anymore. It's, and I'm sure it happens, right? Some people buy a couple packs, build a deck, a couple more packs, tweak their deck or whatever. A lot of people playing card games these days are simply like, well, I'm going to get a deck list and I'm going to build the best deck and just kind of learn from there. Or a lot of people playing card games aren't getting into it for the first time. They're playing on Arena or something and they're learning how to play, and then they start buying packs. And I mean, Arena's got to have the same kind of thing. MTG Arena, for anyone unfamiliar, digital version of Magic. Definitely a cool game to check out if you like that kind of stuff. But there's a reason that they do that. There's a couple of reasons for it, and whether or not you like it is certainly a matter of debate. And once you're used to the game, and the latter no longer applies. And if you don't draft much, the former never applies. So it's completely like, it makes sense if you just like, I just want them to have all good cards, which is something that like Universes strives for.
Yeah, and it's definitely like something that me personally, just because like the way I play is I have two modes. I'm either like super mega competitive mode where I try to build the best thing when I'm like training for like a world's tournament or some big event, or as you guys know, I'm just like, what's the weirdest thing I could make that might just randomly work really well. So it's like with those two modes, there's no room for those random cards, and that's again just why I kind of grew out of Magic after a while, just because it didn't resonate with me on that level. And I guess
Sure.
To bring my third point, because I kind of forgot about it until we were already talking about something else, but is a unique mechanic. For me, if something is trying to play too similarly to something that I've already played or is that already prominent, it's less exciting for me, because I'm the type of person that, like, if it's there and it's too similar, why wouldn't I just play this thing that I already have stuff for? But that's one of the reasons why I like to try at least most games, because I'm like, if it has a sick, cool, unique mechanic, I just want to like explore it and see what kind of cool things I can do. And that's part of the reason I didn't get into Final Fantasy when Dylan was showing it to me. Seems like a cool game, and I'm glad there's a community for it here. It's just it was too close to Magic for me. I know it's fairly different in a lot of mechanics, but the overall like game loop, the way I play games, it was just too similar, and the theme did little to nothing for me. I'm not a big Final Fantasy guy, so without the theme there and the mechanics being too familiar, I kind of fell off the train right away.
It's understandable, and not every game's going to be for everybody. You guys have talked about a lot of the things I would have liked to talk about, so I'm just going to throw in one more thing. And for me, this is more of like a turnoff that can happen. Often it won't happen before the game I get into the game. It'll happen as I play the game. And this is a theme and mechanics mismatch. This is maybe a little different than kind of what Jordan's talking about, but this is more like when I see a particular theme, I sometimes want it to play in a particular way. And I'll play the game for a while and I'll be like, this just isn't like, it's not hitting the right vibe for me. My example for this is Star Wars Destiny. Star Wars Destiny came out when it launched a few years ago. I remember it was announced at Gen Con, and we were like driving home, and I was telling everyone about it. I thought this is going to be awesome. This is going to be a great, fun, finally another Star Wars trading card game to play. And it is a great, it was recently announced, to be discontinued, although they're like putting some random, free support up now, which is kind of cool. So, interesting, but, it was a good game for what it did, but what it did really well was sort of like a small squad versus squad combat game in the Star Wars universe. And what I realized kind of playing it after playing it for a while was that I wasn't getting the big epic Star Wars vibe I wanted out of it. Instead it was kind of too focused, too pared down to just like these couple Star Wars characters fighting, too much minutia in managing your resources and everything. I actually liked the dice aspect. I thought the dice rolling was fun and everything, and I appreciated that. But I just found myself not eager to play because I wasn't getting excited about putting Han in the Falcon and flying to the Death Star and just doing all this like cool, exciting remaking stuff in the movies thing. Instead, it was like, okay, well, I guess Han's going to roll some dice and get a resource, and I'll spend that on this card to re-roll a die, and like it just didn't quite feel like what I wanted it to. So
that's interesting, because I actually think I didn't like Destiny for the opposite reason. Like I got into it for a while, and I was like, it's so cool being able to play with Anakin and Obi-Wan or Han and Leia, and like you've got all these things going around, and you can build your decks in a certain way, and I was like, this is super fun. Like who would beat who in like certain encounters, and like everybody had like a really cool theme to themselves. Like Boba Fett he kind of like got at your armor and he kind of stole stuff from you. I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. It's a little more like ruthlessy. But the thing that kind of turned me off was the die, in that a lot of the times I felt like having to expend resources to re-roll kind of really slowed the game down a lot. And it felt like I just want to do this thing, and I know this is the thing I have to do to beat my opponent. And God just isn't allowing me to roll a 4, you know.
Sure.
So I guess that's interesting that you said that, because I actually really enjoyed the squad on squad combat. I was like, oh, it's super cool that you could have a much bigger squad, and you just had like a certain amount of points that you could do. So you could have like Boba Fett and a bunch of like little guys helping Boba Fett, and, nameless goons. Or you could have, Luke and Han, because they've got their big effects and they know what they're doing. I'm not sure if I'm summing it up in the proper way, but it was stuff like that I found was really interesting.
And if there's room for both opinions for sure. And I think like there's a lot of people who obviously enjoyed every aspect of Destiny. So they took my positives and your positives and like,
sure.
and they thought it was a great game, which is awesome. For me, it comes down to my background. It comes from like, I played the Star Wars customizable card game as like my first card game for forever. And what you're telling me is, you're saying Boba Fett kind of went after armor and kind of did this. If you play Boba Fett in that game, he was Boba Fett through and through. It did every Boba Fett thing you can imagine and had cards that made that happen with absolutely no exception. You couldn't possibly have like thrown another bounty hunter face over him and been like, this works for him too. No, it was like, the theme was so strong in that game, and maybe that's my problem, is just that like I was biased, and I'm like I couldn't get I wasn't getting Star Wars CCG 2.0. I was getting a different game, and that was just bothering me.
Did he die unceremoniously as well, or was it like?
Well, he sure could. You could toss him into the Sarlacc pit if you wanted to. That was like the game remade everything. Everything you wanted to do, you could do in it. So,
was there a vet card for him?
That's
Corvette.
I get the reference, but on that note, if that's where we're diverging, I think it's going to be time to enter the expanded episode. So that kind of covers everyone's main points, though. If you guys enjoyed listening to that, we have on our Patreon at patreon.com/MetaManiacs, you'll have access to all of our expanded episodes. So for the next 40 minutes or so, we're going to delve into some of these and just kind of talk deeper and let ourselves ramble and go into completely unrelated topics and just kind of have fun. If you guys did enjoy this, we'd really appreciate it if you became a patron. We have a ton of amazing patrons who are supporting us right now. Thank you guys so much for all of your support and your encouragement, and it means the world to us. We're going to continue bringing these weekly episodes every Monday. We were going to do a different subject today, but had to just kind of do a change of topic. But I believe next week we will be talking about finally the death of a TCG, and we're going to talk about Destiny and Transformers and Star Wars TCG, probably Metacross, all sorts of stuff.
Sorry, we can't talk about that yet because it's technically not dead.
What?
We'll talk about that too, though. That's another fully very, very.
We'll talk about that next week.
So, thank you guys for watching this one. If you're a patron, see you in the expanded episode. And otherwise, hope you guys have a great week. Stay tuned for more great TCG content from MetaManiacs. See you guys.
See ya.
Take it easy, everyone. Bye.